In the shadow of grunge's rising dominance as Pearl Jam shattered records and MTV turned its back on the glam metal that once ruled its airwaves, Poison embarked on its most daring musical reinvention. The year was 1993, and the band that gave us party anthems like Nothing But a Good Time was about to release a blues-infused, gospel-tinged album that featured a 20-member choir and the Tower of Power horn section. With their guitarist CC DeVille fired after a disastrous television performance and a subsequent backstage brawl, what followed was a tale of creative rebirth, commercial struggle, and a scandalous affair that would tear the band apart just as they were finding their new voice. This is the story of Poison's native tongue, the group's bold experiment that cost them $2.5 million to record, while also dividing their fan base, and it ultimately became the last time they would ever chart on the Billboard Hot 100. It's a fascinating chapter of musical evolution, personal betrayal, and the desperate fight for relevance as the music world changed around them. By the way, guys, let me know if you want more stories about the band Poison in the comments section below. Before we get started, be sure to hit the bell notification icon and put all notifications on. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't even get notifications when I post my videos. Poison's origin story began in the unlikeliest of settings, Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, a blue-collar town that was far removed from the glittering excess of 1980s Los Angeles. Formed in 1983 under the name Paris, the original lineup consisted of vocalist Bret Michaels, guitarist Matt Smith, bassist Bobby Dahl, and drummer Ricky Rocket. They embodied the DIY ethos of the era, playing dive bars and high school gyms while refining their fusion of hard rock, glam theatrics, and pop hooks. The band's relocation to Los Angeles in 1984 marked a pivotal shift. Smith's departure due to his girlfriend being pregnant at the time and moving back home to Pennsylvania opened the door for guitarist CC DeVille to come into the fold. Just an aside, Slash of Guns N' Roses also auditioned for the vacant guitar spot as well, but the guitarist claimed that he wasn't a fan of Poison's stage image. The group soon nabbed a deal with Enigma and Capitol Records. They released their 1986 debut, Look What the Cat Dragged In, and it defied industry expectations, going on to sell 3 million copies just in the US, and it was propelled by MTV's heavy rotation of the songs Talk Dirty to Me, I Want Action, and I Won't Forget You. Two years later, in 1988, the band released their follow-up, Up and Say Ahh. By this point, Poison had ascended to rock royalty with the ballad Every Rose Has Its Thorn topping the Billboard Hot 100 chart, while the album went on to move 5 million units stateside. Every rose has its thorn. However, this level of success also came with a cost. When the band was touring behind their third record, 1990's Flesh and Blood, CC's escalating substance abuse and volatile behavior was straining relationships in the group. Bassist Bobby Dahl was also struggling with substance abuse and had to go to rehab.
Welcome back to the Week in Rock. Rumors that the rock band Poison is on its last legs may turn out to be true, according to lead singer Bret Michaels. In an interview in the new issue of Rip magazine, Michaels says the guitarist CC DeVille and bassist Bobby Dahl, who've been rumored to have serious drug problems, have in fact both checked into drug treatment programs. I can't tell you right now what will happen to us, says Michaels, who's currently touring with his girlfriend, singer Susie Hatton. Addressing DeVille and Dahl, he says, quote, here's your ultimatum, get it together or split. Poison's management says that for the time being, the band is still officially together.
Bret and CC came to blows one night at a New Orleans sports bar while on tour, and it foreshadowed the band imploding in front of a national audience at the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards. There's different explanations or versions of exactly what happened that night. One version is that CC didn't want to play their new single Unskinny Bop and started playing their old hit Talk Dirty to Me. Another version of events is that the guitarist misheard what Bret Michaels had said on stage and was confused. It resulted in him playing the wrong song. Meanwhile, host Arsenio Hall, confused by the whole thing, had to reintroduce the band. Couple this with CC's guitar getting unplugged, and well, the whole thing was a mess.
Well, actually, they need no introduction, right? I'll give them one anyway. Poison! You ready to talk dirty to me? Hit it, CC. When she says those words, that's me. And whisper so softly. I gotta hear her, 'cause baby we'll be after driving in.
Following that performance, Brett and Cece fought each other backstage, and the guitarist was quickly fired from the group. Michaels reflected on the aftermath of the VMAs, recalling, and I won't say anything about substances because we've all had them, but I was never more depressed than that night, and afterwards I just walked out and they had limos waiting for us, but I didn't want one. I went over to an Italian place called Maselli's and got shit-faced drunk. It was a realization that we knew what was happening and we knew what was going on. The next week, it was just a mutual parting of ways. Neither of us believed in each other. CC continued to do drugs and also tried to cut it as a solo artist in the subsequent years. CC remarked in the book Nothing But a Good Time, all of a sudden your real life exceeds your dreams, but then if you still kind of feel empty for something else, for whatever reason, well then the drugs come in. In doing press following the guitarist's departure, Michaels told the Associated Press that in addition to drugs, CC let the critics' bird get into his ear, adding, "I call it the Hollywood syndrome. You get everyone talking in your ear, saying, why don't you do the solo thing?" Meanwhile, his firing left Poison at a crossroads. Their future was uncertain amid grunge's rising dominance. The search for CC's replacement became a defining chapter in Poison's history. After sifting through 3,000 demos, the band narrowed their focus to two guitarists, Blues Saraceno, a technically gifted guitar player with a blues rock pedigree, and a 22-year-old named Richie Kotzen, who had 3 solo albums under his belt at this point. Michaels wanted Kotzen, while Rocket and Dahl preferred Saraceno. Michaels, though, got his way, and in doing press for their first album with Kotzen, Michaels revealed that the band put the guitarist through 20 audition sessions, and he had already written several songs before he became an official member of the band. Poison even auditioned other guys, with Kotzen still working with the group, with Michaels telling the Associated Press, "We'd bring in other guys to set their equipment around just to tick him off. We got into a few arguments about a couple of things. If you hit a guy's ego and he's gone, you know it won't last anyways." Kotzen's influences included Bad Company, Free, as well as R&B artists like Al Green and Stevie Wonder. He played piano at age 5, and by age 13, he graduated to guitar, and by the time he was 15, he was playing full-time in a bar band in Pennsylvania. He was playing 4 nights a week, and one of his parents had to actually accompany him to get into shows. What Poison got with Kotzen wasn't just a talented guitar player who could play their own songs, but he was also a proficient songwriter. Poison didn't want someone just to play their old songs. They wanted someone to contribute greatly in the writing of their 4th record. And that's kind of what saved Kotzen in the audition. He recalled, "Even though Brett wanted me in the band, I still had to play with him. And I blew the audition because I had problems with my amps. I had some vintage Marshalls and smoke started coming out of one of them. And then when I went to play one of their tunes, I was making mistakes because I thought I knew it, but I didn't." He added, "So they said, 'Well, what have you got?' And I played Stand, and Brett loved it."
And speak what we're taught. Lies and money.
It also helped that Kotzen was also from Pennsylvania like the other members of the group. Also happening at this time was that Kotzen was no longer in favor at his record label, who were trying to label him as, and I quote, "a heavy guitar singing, screaming kind of guy." So he was, of course, looking for a new direction in his career. It was his A&R guy at the label who actually told him about Poison wanting to audition him. Kotzen's hiring resulted in Poison going in a much more bluesier direction, and he even played multiple instruments on their 4th album. Kotzen's addition to the band, however, proved to divide fans as well as critics. The band hit the studio with producer Richard Zito, who was known for his work with Bad English as well as Heart, and he also pushed the band towards a more polished blues-influenced direction that emphasized Kotzen's guitar playing style. In addition to Stand, Kotzen also brought several early versions of songs including Until You Suffer Some, Body Talk, and 7 Days Over You, songs that greatly diverged from Poison's earlier party rock anthems.
Pictures shatters. I can't find the words to save it. Tell me already over you. Tell me, mama, what can I do? I got the one thing you want. Get it all night long.
Ricky Rocket told VH1's Behind the Music, "There was this effort to keep this party band image, but we were so over that. Maturity was now a new word that was being thrown around to describe Poison by 1993. Rocket was engaged to a woman named Deanna, Bobby Dahl was now married, and from the outside, things were looking good for the band." But Michaels told VH1, "I was looking over at Richie and saying, man, I just wish Cece was there." And that was something the other members felt as well. Kotzen, meanwhile, admitted to the Another Effin' podcast with Izzy Presley that he was used to spending $20,000 on records that he had made for his old label Shrapnel Records. And when it came time to work with Poison, they spent something in the order of $2.5 million on Native Tongue. The opening tribal rhythms on Native Tongue transitioned to the song The Scream, which is a dark, aggressive rocker with both songs featuring Sheila E. on percussion. Meanwhile, the gospel-tinged Stand incorporated a 20-member choir and Tower of Power horn section. Lyrically, the album was also more mature. Songs like 7 Days Over You dealt with addiction, while Blind Faith dealt with social inequality, while Bastard Son of a Thousand Blues dealt with existential reflection. This maturity was already being previewed on the previous record, Flesh and Blood, with the song Something to Believe In, which actually peaked at number 4 on the Hot 100 chart.
I give you something to believe in.
Michaels told the LA Times in 1993, "The change has been a natural thing. When I moved to LA, I was 19 years old and I came from a small town outside of Pittsburgh. We lived in a warehouse in Hollywood and I got to see stuff that you'd only see in the movies. So we wanted to be very shocking," adding, "But the more I've seen and the more I've done, the more I have to write about. So we've become better with each record." Stand was the first single issued from Poison's fourth album, Native Tongue. Released in January of 93, it eventually reached number 50 on the Hot 100 chart and number 15 on the Album Rock Tracks chart. It was actually the last time Poison hit the Hot 100. While Kotzen brought the song to the band, frontman Bret Michaels wanted to kind of tweak the lyrics, with Kotzen adding, so in the end he rewrote the lyrics in the verses based on what I'd come up with, and it came out great. In 2022, Kotzen told Vinyl Writer Music, "There were a few songs that Michaels brought in that he had written, a song called Theater of the Soul, and another one was Strike Up the Band. Then the others came out of us jamming, and Brett and I did the lyrics together. All 15 of the tracks on the release are actually credited to all 4 band members." Native Tongue featured several other singles, but none of them charted in the US, but the song Until You Suffer Some did chart in the UK, peaking at number 32. Released on February 8th, 1993, Native Tongue debuted at number 16 on the Billboard 200 and achieved gold certification. The album's commercial performance reflected broader industry shifts, with grunge and alternative rock dominating the charts. Just for comparison's sake, Pearl Jam's album Versus, which came out in late 1993, sold nearly 1 million copies in its first week of release. According to Michaels, fan mail also revealed that the group's older fans rejected Kotzen's guitar playing and the band's evolved sound. To support the album, Poison toured alongside Damn Yankees and Firehouse. A funny little note from this tour came from the LA Times. Michaels came up with the idea of the backstage party cage, wherein a local DJ randomly selects fans at each show, throws them in a rolling cage, and wheels them backstage to meet the band. Kotzen's time in the band came to an abrupt end when he had an affair with Ricky Rocket's fiancée. The drummer had lived with his fiancée for about 4 years, and they were engaged for 2 years. Upon confessing the affair to Rocket, who was obviously devastated, Kotzen was fired from the band. Michaels recounted to VH1, "We took his bags and chucked them over the fence, and that's the last time I've ever seen him. That was it. I never want to see him again." Following his departure, Michaels spoke to Kerrang! Magazine, who told the publication, "I never really got to know the guy," referring to Richie. "The camaraderie was missing, and that's very important for our band. I was pissed off because we had exposed our fans to what I wanted to be the band for the rest of our career." Kotzen years later remarked that the reporting over his affair with Rocket's fiancée was overblown, telling Izzy Presley, "I will tell you the truth of the matter is that it was really sensationalized. It wasn't nearly as insane as what was put out in the press. They needed a story because the tour was bombing and the band was going into oblivion. So to speak, they needed a story." Michaels realized that his band wasn't being played as much on MTV, recalling, "Music had totally changed. We're not being played on MTV. I bitched, I complained. I'm like, what are they, crazy?" Poison decided to march on, enlisting Blue Saraceno, who had previously lost out on the guitar spot to Kotzen. In 1994, the band began recording their 5th studio album, Crack a Smile and More, but plans for the record came to an abrupt halt when in May of 1994, Michaels, after a heavy night of partying, crashed his Ferrari, breaking his nose, ribs, jaw, and fingers, in addition to losing 4 teeth. The band's hard partying lifestyle and changing musical scene also resulted in the members taking stock, realizing they needed to take a break. Perhaps no one needed a break more than 31-year-old Bobby Dahl, who told VH1 that he physically could not stop drinking at this point. His wife, however, was expecting their first child, and thanks to AA, he was finally able to sober up. Following Michaels' recovery, the band continued recording in 1995. However, to the group's surprise, their label Capitol Records, by this point, decided not to put out the album and instead released a greatest hits record in 1996. Crack a Smile didn't end up coming out until the year 2000. DeVille, meanwhile, rejoined the group in 1996. Years later, Michaels looked back at the change in the musical landscape in the early 90s, telling an interviewer that he didn't feel any ill will or animosity towards groups like Nirvana and other bands from Seattle. He admitted, "Grunge was great. We used Nirvana's director Sam Baer on the video to Stand. Alice in Chains' first arena show was opening for Poison. I was like, I didn't know I was in a fight with Alice in Chains. They were just in my house riding go-karts. You know what I mean? I don't have a victim mentality. I take responsibility for things that happen." As for their period with Kotzen, Bobby Dahl recounted to VH1, "Poison's Bobby, Ricky, Brett, and Cece. That is Poison. That will always be Poison. It feels awkward with anyone else but Cece." After his time with the group, Kotzen continued to pursue a solo career, but it proved a difficult period in his life. He remarked, "From 95 all the way to early 2000s, it was really rough. In 97, I was 27. I was being told I was too old. I've been in so many crazy situations. That's just too insane to go through." He survived this period by making solo records and licensing them to different territories. Then in 1999, he joined Mr. Big, and most recently he's been playing in the Winery Dogs. Looking back at Native Tongue, he told Izzy Presley, "I joined a band that really opened the creative door for me to do whatever the hell I wanted. I mean, the Native Tongue record could have easily been my solo record. I mean, they let me do whatever I wanted, and the only difference is that I co-wrote the lyrics with Bret Michaels, and he was the lead singer." As for whether Kotzen has run into his ex-bandmates over the years, he has. 5 years after leaving Poison, he met Bobby Dahl one night at the Rainbow, and they had a nice chat. He then met Bret Michaels at a rock and roll fantasy camp, and they seemed to clear the air on a lot of things. And he also met CeCe DeVille. They just happened to share the same tour people. In the craziest twist, Kotzen's wife is a bass player who actually played a show with Ricky Rocket. He added, "I ran into him, I said hello, shook his hand." Decades later, Native Tongue seems to have found a devoted fan base. Drummer Ricky Rocket has even praised the album years later as well. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in Rock Roll True Story sticker.